The heat in Prescott, Arizona didn't just burn. It pressed. Dry, oppressive, and relentless, like it wanted everything beneath it to vanish. Caleb Wyatt stepped out the back door of the Pine Haven Rescue Shelter to catch a breath that didn't smell like antiseptic. The garbage bins buzzed with flies in their usual defiant cloud. But something was different today. There was a box by the chain-link fence. A produce crate, sun-faded and dented, the kind that used to carry oranges or avocados. Now it just sat there like a piece of forgotten junk. Caleb wouldn't have noticed it if it hadn't shifted. Just a little. Just enough. He squinted, took a step forward, then another. The smell hit first, sharp, metallic, and wrong. Blood. Then he saw the words. Scrawled in thick black marker across the side, the message read, "Don't want her." His breath caught. He dropped to one knee, heart already pounding. Inside, curled into a shape so small it looked like she was trying to fold herself out of existence, was a puppy. German shepherd, maybe 3 months old. White-coated, though the grime made it hard to tell. Her left paw was bent under her at an angle no paw should bend. Dried blood clung to her side in flakes and streaks. Her ears were too still. She didn't look up. "Jesus!" Caleb muttered, his voice cracking between shock and fury. "What the hell happened to you?" No sound, no growl, not even a twitch. He eased a hand toward her. Slowly. No sudden moves. The flies rose like smoke. Her skin flinched once, barely. But she didn't pull away. She didn't retreat deeper into the box. She just opened one eye, cloudy, dull, and unfocused, and looked straight through him like she wasn't sure he was real. Caleb whispered, "Hey, sweetheart, you're okay now, I got you." Her body was warm, not the good kind of warm, the kind that meant dehydration, infection. She was trembling hard, her ribs ticking like a broken metronome. She weighed nothing. Maybe 8 pounds, if that. A ghost made of fur and suffering. He cradled her against his chest and shouted towards the building, "Emergency intake!" Inside the shelter's clinic, everything moved in fast forward. Techs scrambled, gloves snapped, towels, 4 bags, antiseptics. Caleb laid her gently on the steel table. She didn't whine, didn't resist, just lay there, eyes half-lidded, too tired even for fear. "Pulse is weak," said Janelle, one of the vet techs, threading a catheter into the puppy's front leg. "We need to get her temp down." "Was she dumped?" Lisa, the on-call vet, asked as she grabbed Celine. "Out back," Caleb said, not moving from her side. "In a box. No water, no blanket, just that message." Lisa's jaw tensed. "You thinking we called this one Scout?" Caleb blinked at her. "Why Scout?" She shrugged. "Because she found her way to us. Somehow." He looked down at the dog. White fur, matted and scorched in places. A faint line of what looked like rope burn across her neck. The curve of her spine pressed up against her skin like the outline of a shattered thing trying to rebuild. She was still here. "Yeah," he said. "Scout." They worked in silence after that. Every few seconds, Caleb checked her chest. Still breathing. Still fighting. That word hung in the air. Fighting. But she didn't look like a fighter. She looked like surrender. Like a question no one had answered. Janelle layered warm towels beneath her. "She'll need time, and quiet, and no stress." Caleb nodded. "She's got me." Hours passed. The clinic settled into the late afternoon lull. Scout hadn't moved, not really, but her breathing had steadied. Caleb hadn't left. He sat on the floor beside the table, his hand resting just next to her paw. At some point, barely noticeable, her toes shifted, just a fraction, to rest against his fingers. A jolt of something electric lit up his chest. "You're still in there." he whispered. Aren't you? Scout's ears didn't flick, her tail didn't move, but her paw stayed. Janelle returned with a tray of soft broth. She'll need help. You think she's ready? She's looking at me like she's listening, Caleb said. He dipped a finger into the lukewarm liquid and brought it to her nose. At first, nothing. Then a sniff. Faint, curious. Then a flick of her dry tongue. Caleb didn't breathe. She licked it, he said. Janelle smiled gently. Then she's saying yes. That night, long after closing, Caleb walked into the supply closet and found a small, battered stuffed bear, the kind they usually gave to adopted puppies for the ride home. He brought it to her recovery kennel and placed it beside her. Scout didn't react at first, but when he came back from checking the med chart, she had nudged it with her nose. A tiny gesture. Protective. Like it was hers. Like she knew, somewhere deep in that battered little frame, that she was finally allowed to have something. Caleb sat on the floor again. No words, no noise, just the shared silence between a man and the smallest survivor he'd ever met. He didn't know it yet, but Scout had already chosen him. Not out of fear. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because when the world gave her nothing, he was the first one who didn't look away. Scout didn't cry that night. She didn't whimper or bark or make a sound. But Caleb didn't sleep. He brought in an old sleeping mat and laid it on the clinic floor beside her kennel. The building was quiet after hours, save for the low hum of a ceiling fan and the occasional creak of metal cages settling. Outside, the desert wind swept across the gravel lot. Inside, Caleb watched over her like the breath in her chest was made of glass. At 2:17 a.m., she stirred. Not much, just a lift of her head, barely, and a flutter of her right ear. Caleb pushed up onto one elbow, whispering, "Hey, Scout. You with me?" Her nose twitched. She blinked slowly, like dragging herself from somewhere far deeper than sleep. Her gaze was hazy, swimming with pain and confusion, but this time it landed on him and stayed, not through him, at him. "I'm still here," he murmured. "Told you I'm not going anywhere." The only reply was her breath, thin but present, warming the blanket beneath her chin. At sunrise, Lisa stepped into the clinic, a mug of gas station coffee in one hand and a raised eyebrow. "Did you stay all night?" "Yeah. Caleb." "I know." She softened, stepping closer to the kennel and glancing at Scout. "Any changes?" She lifted her head, looked at me. Lisa crouched beside him and examined the chart. "Temperature's stabilizing. Fluids are holding. Good signs." "She still hasn't made a sound." Lisa paused. "Some dogs don't right away. Not because they can't, because they don't know they're allowed." That hit something in him. Deep. Caleb stayed with Scout through morning check-ins. While the rest of the staff bustled around intake appointments and routine meds, he hand-fed her a few teaspoons of broth, held her paw during bandage changes, and whispered updates like she understood every word. Maybe she did. By early afternoon, she was sitting up. Wobbly, leaning against the kennel wall, but upright. It was Janelle who noticed first. "Hey, look at her ear. The right one." Caleb leaned in. Sure enough, the tip of Scout's ear had folded forward slightly. It wasn't standing up like the other, giving her a lopsided, almost cartoonish look. He smiled. "Fighter's ear." "What?" "She's got a fighter's ear, always tilted forward, listening for what's next." Janelle laughed. "You're a sap, you know that?" But the name stuck. The fighter's ear. Late in the day, Caleb stepped outside to take a call. A truck had broken down on the outskirts of town, and the driver claimed there were 2 dogs chained in the bed. No food, no water. The shelter would have to respond. He was halfway through telling the volunteer dispatcher they'd send someone when he turned and saw her. Scout, standing, outside the kennel. She'd dragged herself, step by aching step, to the edge of the recovery room. No one had noticed the kennel latch hadn't clicked all the way. She didn't run, didn't whimper, just stood there, legs trembling, that one crooked ear pointed at the door like a compass. Caleb dropped the phone. "Scout?" he said, stunned. She looked at him, not just with need, but with decision. She had chosen him again. He moved slowly, crouching to her level. "How'd you get out, huh?" She didn't answer, obviously, but she didn't move away either, just waited until he reached her. Then, without a sound, she pressed her head gently into his chest. That was when Riley walked in. New tech, a transfer from a clinic in Flagstaff. She froze in the doorway, a clipboard in hand. "That, the box dog?" Caleb didn't love the phrase. "Her name's Scout." Riley stepped forward. "She's out?" "She's okay." "I wouldn't be too sure." Riley said it flat, clinical. Some of these trauma dogs never really come back. They fake it, long enough to get adopted. Then boom, they snap. Caleb didn't respond. But Scout did. Her body stiffened, subtly, just enough that Caleb could feel the change beneath his hand. No growl, no bark. But her muscles tensed, her ears flattened, her tail curled under. Riley didn't notice, but Caleb did, and he didn't forget. That night, he brought in a stuffed fox toy. Soft, orange, with beady little eyes. Scout sniffed it once, then again, and then slowly tucked her chin into its side. Caleb sat beside her kennel and whispered, "That's yours now. No one's taking it." She didn't sleep right away. Neither did he. But sometime after midnight, when the lights were dimmed and the building had exhaled into quiet again, Scout did something she hadn't done since she arrived. She exhaled. One long, slow breath that left her whole body just a little lighter. Like a piece of her had unclenched. Like she was starting to believe she might actually be safe. Scout's healing came quietly. No big moments, no sudden leaps, just subtle shifts, like shadows moving across a wall. She started eating on her own, slowly, deliberately, as if every bite required permission. Her paws still trembled when she walked, the left one dragging just slightly across the vinyl floor of the recovery room. But she walked. That alone was enough to draw a small crowd of staff from the front desk one morning, watching through the glass as Scout took 4 full steps toward her food bowl without falling. Caleb didn't cheer. He didn't clap like the others. He just crouched beside her afterward, whispered, "Good job, girl," and let her rest her head on his knee. She had stopped recoiling when people touched her. Mostly. With him, she leaned in now. With Lisa, she tolerated the meds, the bandage changes. But with strangers, she stayed cautious. Her eyes tracked every movement, especially if they wore gloves. Then came Riley again. It was a Tuesday, late morning. Caleb had stepped out to grab coffee from the corner diner, leaving Scout with her fox toy and a soft fleece blanket in the recovery kennel. When he returned, something felt wrong before he even stepped through the back door. It was too quiet. He walked in and found Riley kneeling beside Scout's kennel, one hand on the latch, the other extended into the space, flat-palmed, fingers twitching. Scout wasn't wagging. She wasn't moving. She was locked still, rigid, ears flat, eyes wide. "Back away from the kennel," Caleb said, voice low but firm. Riley jerked, pulling her hand out. "She's fine. I was just trying to see if she'd take a treat." She wasn't ready. "She has to be socialized, doesn't she? Or do you plan to? Keep her feral?" Caleb stepped forward and opened the door to the kennel himself. Scout didn't flinch when he reached in, only relaxed slightly when his fingers brushed her shoulder. Riley watched, unimpressed. She's going to need to be around more people if she's ever going to be adoptable. She muttered, grabbing a clipboard from the counter. She doesn't have to like everyone. Caleb replied, just the right ones. Riley rolled her eyes and left. Later that day, Scout did something that made Caleb stop mid-task. She barked. Just once. Short. Sharp. The sound of a throat not used to being heard. He was restocking IV bags when it happened. Scout had been lying near the edge of her kennel, fox toy tucked beneath one paw, when a volunteer knocked over a metal pan. The crash echoed off the tile like a gunshot. The dogs down the row all howled or barked. But Scout stood, hackles raised, body still trembling, and let out one single bark. Caleb spun around. The sound still rang in his ears. Lisa came rushing in. Was that her? She barked, Caleb said, stunned. Scout lowered herself again, but her eyes never left the door. Not fearful. Alert. Lisa crouched. That's a big step. She was protecting the room, Caleb said, more to himself than anyone else. She wasn't scared. She was warning. Later that evening, while locking up, Caleb opened her kennel and sat cross-legged beside her. She crawled into his lap like it was the most natural place in the world. You don't make noise unless you have something to say, huh? He whispered. Scout blinked, slow and steady. That paw, still wrapped in light gauze, rested on his leg. She was claiming him. Quietly. Undeniably. The next morning brought an email from a local rescue partner. One line stood out. FYI, the vet tech Riley you brought on? She worked 6 months at a puppy mill recovery facility near Flagstaff. There was an internal investigation. Never closed, just keep an eye. Caleb stared at the screen. The email was vague. No details, no accusations. But it was enough. He closed his laptop and looked across the room at Scout, who was now standing, leaning against her kennel door, tail lifting slightly when she saw him. Just one slow wag. Not excitement, recognition, trust. And for the first time, Caleb didn't just feel responsible for her recovery, he felt responsible for her story. She wasn't just a rescue anymore, she was a witness, a survivor, a being whose silence wasn't weakness. It was memory. And somewhere, buried deep, was a chapter no one had ever read aloud. But Scout, she remembered. And now she wasn't alone. Scout had made it through the worst of the physical trauma. Her wounds were healing, her appetite had returned, and she could walk short distances without dragging her paw too much. The staff said she was doing great. On paper she was. But something in her eyes hadn't shifted. Not yet. She was alert, responsive, even affectionate in her own quiet way. But only with Caleb. With everyone else, Scout remained locked in that cautious stillness. Her progress wasn't a straight line, it was a tightrope, one shaky step at a time. And then came the meeting. Wednesday afternoon, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Caleb sat at the long table in the staff lounge with Lisa, the shelter director Elena Hayes, and Riley, who leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. She's been medically cleared, Lisa said. Scout's recovery is well ahead of schedule. That's amazing, Elena added, flipping through her clipboard. And it means she can go up for adoption. Caleb tensed. Already? Elena nodded. She's young, beautiful, and a shepherd. We've got a waiting list for dogs like her. The longer we wait, the more likely we miss the right match. She's not ready, Caleb said. Riley snorted. She's walking, eating, barked at me last week. She's plenty ready. Caleb ignored her. Scout still freezes when a new volunteer walks in. She only plays when no one's watching. She hasn't even explored past the clinic hallway. Elena raised a brow. Are we talking about what's best for her, or what's best for you? That landed hard. Caleb glanced down at the table. He could feel Lisa watching him. He didn't answer. That evening, the shelter posted Scout's photo on the adoption board. Just a test, they said. See who's interested. No commitment yet. By the next morning, 4 families had inquired. 2 had filled out applications. 1 sent in a video of their backyard. Scout's name was on the board now, in bold black ink, beside a laminated sheet listing her age, breed, medical history, and temperament. She deserves a real home, Elena said gently. Caleb couldn't argue with that. He just wasn't sure Scout would survive another goodbye. Later that night, he sat beside her in the dim quiet of the recovery room. Scout had curled up beside the fox toy as usual, but she wasn't asleep. Her eyes tracked him. She knew something had shifted. Dogs always know. I didn't want this to happen so fast. He murmured, not because I don't want you to find a home, but because I think I'm the only one who really sees you. She didn't move, but her breathing slowed. She was listening. You don't have to be fixed all at once. You're allowed to take your time. You're allowed to be. Stillness again. And then, slowly, she did something she hadn't done in weeks. She stood. Walked, limped, really, past the edge of her kennel, across the room to the corner where an old cardboard box still sat. The one she'd been found in. Folded up, tucked behind a stack of unused crates. Caleb's chest tightened. Scout nudged the box with her nose, then gently, carefully, stepped into it. Turned once. Settled. Her head rested on the edge, blue eyes half-lidded, but locked on him. Like she remembered. Like she needed him to remember too. He dropped to his knees, unable to breathe for a moment. Why'd you do that? He whispered. Why now? She didn't blink, didn't move, just stayed in that box like it still held her past, and she wasn't done with it yet. That night, he didn't sleep. In the morning, when Elena came in with a new stack of forms and a hopeful couple waiting in the front lobby, Caleb made his decision. I'm pulling her off the board, he said. Elena's eyebrows shot up. You're what? She's not ready. Not yet. She'll miss her window, Caleb. People want puppies. She won't stay adoptable forever. Caleb shook his head. Scout's not a product. She's a soul, and she gets to decide when she's ready. Not us. Elena didn't argue. Not really. She just stared at him for a moment, then nodded once, tightly, and walked out. Scout stayed in the box that morning, even after breakfast. Not curled in pain this time, not cowering, waiting, owning it. Later that day, Caleb walked into the recovery room with a marker. Black. Thick-tipped. The kind they used to label crates and supply bins. He knelt by the box. Scout raised her head. He stared at the faded words still barely visible on the side. Don't want her. With one stroke, he drew a line through the sentence. Then, just beneath it, he wrote 3 new words. Still here. Fighting. Scout blinked slowly, then laid her head back down on the edge of the box. And for the first time, Caleb swore he saw it, just the tiniest flick of a tail. She knew, and she wasn't leaving. Scout barked again, not out of fear. This time, it was a warning. It happened during the Thursday morning feeding rotation. Caleb had just finished logging meds when he heard it. A low, sharp bark from the recovery wing, followed by a sudden clatter of metal. He dropped his clipboard. By the time he reached the hall, Lisa was already there, standing frozen outside Scout's kennel. The stainless steel water bowl lay flipped on its side. Water pooled beneath Scout's front paws. Her body was rigid, muscles locked, head lowered. But it was her eyes that stopped Caleb cold. She wasn't reacting randomly, she was watching Riley. Riley stood 5 feet away, holding a bag of treats, hand suspended mid-air, as if frozen in a moment she didn't want to explain. She just snapped, Riley said too quickly. I didn't even touch her. Caleb looked from Riley to Scout. He crouched low. It's okay, he said gently. You're all right, girl. I'm here. Scout didn't look at him. Not right away. Her eyes stayed fixed on Riley. Then, slowly, deliberately, she stepped back from the puddle, settled herself down, and wrapped her tail around her side like a protective barrier. The message was loud. Don't come closer. Caleb straightened. Riley, you can go. What? You're done for today. She narrowed her eyes. You're kicking me off rotation because a dog barked? I'm asking you to leave, now. Riley stormed off without another word, but something in her posture. It wasn't frustration. It was fear. And it wasn't the first time Caleb had seen Scout react like that. Not to strangers, not to loud noises. Only to Riley. Later that afternoon, when the clinic quieted and most of the staff had gone to lunch, Caleb slipped into the storage room. There was a folder, old, misfiled, connected to the Flagstaff case. Riley had worked at a mill-turned-foster center 2 years ago, the one that was shut down before a full audit could be completed. Abuse allegations, dogs returned with signs of trauma, incomplete paperwork, no charges ever filed. But there were whispers. Caleb shut the folder and leaned against the metal shelf. He was gripping the edge too tightly. His hands had gone pale. Scout hadn't just remembered her pain. She had remembered who caused it. He returned to the recovery room just as Lisa was finishing up with another dog. I need to move Scout, Caleb said. Lisa blinked. Why? Her vitals are stable. I need her where I can see her, all the time. Lisa watched him carefully, then nodded. You think something happened? I don't think, Caleb said. I know, I just can't prove it. They moved Scout into the side clinic office, a quiet room with a large window and low lighting. Caleb brought her bed, her fox toy, and the blanket that still carried the scent of his truck. She sniffed everything, hesitated, then walked in without a sound. That evening, Caleb stayed late. Scout lay curled in the corner while he worked on his laptop, tapping through case logs. Outside, the parking lot emptied. Inside, the building fell into a hush. At 8:47 p.m., Scout stood up, walked across the room, sat beside Caleb's desk. He looked down. What is it, girl? She stared at him. Then, without a sound, placed her paw gently on his foot. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a request. It was a statement. I trust you. I remember. And I'm still here. He knelt down and cupped her face in his hands. You're safe now. No one gets to hurt you again. The next morning, he filed a formal complaint with the board. 2 hours later, Riley was placed on leave. The staff didn't ask why, but the energy shifted. Some already suspected. Others didn't want to know. Scout didn't react. She simply began to rest more peacefully, waking with less tension, watching the doorway without bracing. That night, for the first time, she picked up her fox toy, carried it to the blanket, and lay down with her back to the door. It was the most vulnerable she had ever let herself be. And Caleb understood what it meant. She was reclaiming something no one else could see. Not survival, ownership, of space, of silence, of self. That night, when he turned off the last light and walked past her window, she didn't lift her head, didn't bark, just slept, because she knew he wasn't going anywhere. Scout's world had changed again, this time in a way that didn't make her flinch. Since Riley's departure, she'd begun to unfurl like a page left in the sun. There was less stiffness in her spine, less pause in her steps. She still didn't wag her tail for just anyone, but when Caleb walked into the room, she lifted her head before he even spoke. It was subtle, the way trust returned. It didn't come in waves, it came in thumps, one quiet heartbeat at a time. She no longer stayed huddled in the corner. She started exploring the clinic office, sniffing cords, nosing at Caleb's boots, pressing her paw into the base of the desk like it might tell her something about permanence. Then came the mop. The staff had brought one in for a quick end-of-week cleanup. Lisa rolled it in casually, head tilted, earbuds in. The second the mop handle passed the doorframe, Scout went still. Not panic, not cowering. She stood. Firm growled, low and steady, from a place buried deep. Lisa froze mid-step. "It's just the mop, sweetheart." Caleb stepped in behind her and stopped. "No," he said quietly. "It's not." Scout's body wasn't reacting to a cleaning tool. She was remembering something. The staff didn't press her. They backed off. But Caleb noted every moment, every shift, every fragment of memory flickering behind her eyes. Later that day, he sat with her in the front garden of the shelter, just outside the office windows. She walked beside him, still with a slight limp, the paw never quite landing square, but stronger than before. She sniffed the grass, the wind, the bench. Then, without hesitation, curled at his feet and laid her chin on the laces of his boots. "She's almost ready," Lisa said, stepping out with 2 adoption folders in hand. "Families are waiting. We had 3 inquiries this week alone." Caleb nodded, but didn't respond. Scout didn't look up. She just sighed. That night, it rained. Prescott didn't get storms often, but when they came, they rolled in fast and brutal. The wind howled through the alley beside the clinic. Thunder cracked like a rifle. Dogs in the back kennels howled in response. Scout didn't. She sat calmly in the office, her fox toy beside her, listening. Caleb entered quietly. He expected to find her hiding under the desk. Instead, he found her standing at the window, watching the storm. She didn't flinch when lightning cracked, didn't tuck her tail when thunder rolled overhead. She turned and saw him, then did something new. She walked to him, pressed her body gently into his leg, and sat down, head high, ears forward, back straight. No fear, just presence. He crouched beside her, one hand on her back. "Not scared anymore, huh?" She didn't answer, of course, but he felt it, the calm in her bones, the way her breathing stayed even. Scout wasn't surviving anymore. She was assessing, choosing. She had crossed, from victim to guardian. And she'd done it silently. The next morning, Caleb got a call from the front desk. "There's a new intake, found by the train yard. Pretty bad shape. Staff doesn't think she'll eat. Can you bring Scout?" It was an unofficial practice now. Scout, the quiet therapist. She wasn't trained. She didn't perform commands. But when the new dogs came in shaking and lost, she'd sit beside their kennels, calm and still. No barking, no pushiness, just presence. Caleb clipped her soft blue collar and walked her into the intake wing. The new arrival was a terrier mix, curled so tightly into the far corner of the kennel that you could barely see her eyes. Scout approached, slow, measured. She didn't touch the gate. She just sat down. Waited. 10 minutes passed. 15. Then the terrier uncurled, just a little, lifted her head, then crawled forward, one paw at a time, until her nose pressed softly to the bars. Scout stayed exactly where she was. The room fell quiet. Caleb turned to Lisa, standing in the hallway. "She's doing it again," he said. "She's helping them the way no person can." Lisa nodded, misty-eyed. She remembers, and she chooses to stay anyway. That night, after everyone else had gone home, Caleb walked Scout into the back garden again. The stars were out. The storm had scrubbed the sky clean. Scout stepped off the gravel and into the grass. Rolled, not frantically, not fearfully. Just one long, slow stretch into the earth, like she had remembered what it felt like to play. Caleb sat on the bench, watching her. "You're not just back," he said aloud. "You're leading." She didn't look up. She just flopped to her side, tongue lolling out, that crooked ear flicking like it had a mind of its own. When she stood again, she carried herself differently. Not like a dog in recovery, like a dog with purpose. And as she walked back to him, fox toy dangling from her mouth, Caleb realized something with sudden clarity. Scout had never been asking to be saved. She had been asking if it was safe to become herself again. The next challenge came without warning. It was Friday. Routine, calm, too calm. The kind of quiet that usually meant something was about to shift. The shelter was between intakes. Scout had just finished a light meal and was curled beside Caleb's desk, her fox toy tucked beneath her jaw like a secret. Outside, the sun was dipping behind the hills, turning the Arizona sky a muted gold. Then the storm sirens wailed. Not a weather alert, a fire signal. "Wildland flare-up," Lisa called, appearing in the doorway with her phone lit up. 2 miles west, winds changing. Prescott had seen dry summers before, but this year had been brutal. One stray lightning strike in the hills and everything turned into kindling. Caleb stood quickly. "We need to prep evacuation, just in case." The shelter had protocols, emergency crates, transport vans, partner fosters on speed dial, but none of it ever felt fast enough when flames were involved. Scout, sensitive as ever, stood at full alert before Caleb had finished the sentence. She didn't panic. She didn't bark. She simply walked to the door and sat beside it, eyes fixed on the hallway like she was ready to report for duty. And in a way, she was. 10 minutes later, the power flickered. Then the lights died completely. Backup generators kicked in after a beat, casting the clinic in a dim orange hue. Not enough to calm the dogs. Not enough to make the howling stop. Scout stayed steady. Caleb worked fast with Lisa and 2 volunteers, checking each room, unlocking crates, tagging collars. Through it all, Scout followed. Quiet. Watching. And then it happened. In the chaos of shifting dogs and flickering lights, one of the newer arrivals, a Shepherd Lab mix named Bodie, slipped his crate gate. He bolted. Straight through the open clinic wing, straight into the main hallway, toward the exit. Caleb heard the scrambling nails before he saw the blur of fur. "Body!" Too late, except Scout was already moving. She didn't run. She sprinted, despite the limp that had never quite left her. Her body shot forward, agile and focused, cutting through the narrow hallway like a shadow with a mission. Body skidded on the linoleum, headed for the front door, the one that hadn't been fully secured in the rush. But Scout was faster. She reached him in 3 bounds, planted herself sideways across his path like a wall of white fur and willpower. Body hesitated, just enough for Caleb to catch up and grab his collar. Scout didn't growl, didn't dominate. She simply stared at Bodie until he backed down. Lisa arrived seconds later, breathless. "What just happened?" "She stopped him," Caleb said, stunned. She actually stopped him. Scout stood there, chest heaving, but steady. Her tail lifted once, a single wave. Then she turned and walked back to the recovery room like she'd just done her job, and there was nothing more to it. That night, with the threat downgraded and the fire contained outside city limits, the shelter staff sat in a quiet kind of awe. "She's more than recovered," one volunteer whispered. "She's leading." Caleb didn't say much. He sat beside Scout in the garden again, the stars crisp above them, the scent of scorched sage drifting in from the west. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "But you did." Scout lay at his feet, ears relaxed, her whole body finally at ease. Her fox toy rested between her paws, and when Caleb reached down to touch her collar, her tail gave that quiet thump again. He had thought she was healing, but the truth was more than that. Scout was transforming, not back into what she was before, into something stronger, something wiser. A dog who knew what danger looked like, what loss tasted like, and chose, again and again, to stay soft anyway. That night she crawled into her bed, tugged the fox toy close, and didn't even lift her head when the wind rattled the windows, because she knew she belonged, because she knew she mattered, and because, at last, she wasn't just safe. She was home. For now. And maybe forever. Scout started waiting by the door around 10:55 every morning. Caleb noticed it first as a pattern. Right before lunch rounds, she would rise from her bed, stretch, shake off the morning stillness, and walk to glass-paneled office door like something was about to arrive. Then one Saturday, it did. The couple walked in quietly. Early 30s, hands intertwined, expressions soft but hesitant. The woman had red hair pulled into a loose bun, and the man had a small notebook tucked under his arm. Elena greeted them at the front desk. "We saw her online," the woman said. "The white German shepherd. Scout." Lisa led them through the intake hall, toward the recovery wing. Scout stood up before the door even opened, not in excitement, not fear, just calm readiness. When the door clicked open, Scout didn't move forward. She stayed where she was, her fox toy still resting under one paw. The couple paused at the threshold. "She's smaller than I expected," the man said. "She's perfect," the woman whispered. Caleb stayed in the corner, watching. Scout looked at the strangers with her usual still gaze, neutral, cautious, collecting data. The woman crouched, extended a hand. The man followed, kneeling just a few feet away. Scout glanced at Caleb just once, before stepping forward and gently sniffing the woman's fingertips. The woman didn't cry until Scout laid down right in front of her. "We had a shepherd named Luna," she said. "We lost her last fall. I didn't think we were ready again. She looks like hope," the man added. Caleb felt something squeeze in his chest. The couple stayed for nearly an hour. They asked all the right questions about food, behavior, routine. They offered soft words, steady hands. Scout accepted every touch, but her eyes kept drifting back to Caleb. After they left to fill out paperwork, Elena turned to him. "They're perfect. She'll have a yard. Other dogs. 2 gentle souls who've loved before. You did it." But Caleb didn't move. He walked back to the office, knelt beside Scout's bed, and placed his hand over hers. "You okay?" he asked softly. Scout pressed her forehead into his palm. Not a push, a rest. That evening, while packing Scout's things, a folder with medical records, a list of her feeding schedule, her favorite treats, Caleb found himself staring at the old cardboard box folded near the storage bins, the same one she had arrived in. Faded, dented, but still readable. "Don't want her." He stood there a long time. Then a rustle behind him made him turn. Scout had followed. She stepped into the box again, slowly, like she was revisiting something she needed to remember. She didn't curl up like before. She stood tall this time, looked at him. The meaning was clear. Don't forget. Caleb's throat tightened. He grabbed a thick black marker. Not the kind they used for inventory, the same kind they used that first day. He crouched and drew a deep line through the old words. Then beneath them, in slow, careful strokes, he wrote, "Loved, wanted, home." Scout stepped out of the box, walked to him, touched her nose to the letters, then rested her chin on his knee. The next morning, the couple returned with a new collar, a matching leash, and hearts full of hope. Caleb met them outside. "She's ready," Elena said softly. But Caleb didn't move toward them. He crouched beside Scout, clipped the new collar around her neck, and whispered, "If you want to go, I'll walk you to the gate myself." Scout looked at the couple, then back at him. Then she did something unexpected. She turned, walked right back to the door of the office, and sat. Elena blinked. She's refusing? The couple smiled sadly. She already chose. Caleb didn't say anything. He didn't have to. That afternoon he tore the adoption application in half. Scout lay beside him that evening, fox toy under her paw, head tucked into the crook of his arm like she'd been doing it her whole life. He hadn't rescued her. She had claimed him. And this time, neither of them was going anywhere. Scout didn't leave the shelter that week. Or the next. By unspoken consensus, her adoption file was pulled and locked away. No more visitors, no more evaluations. Scout had made her decision clear. And Caleb? He finally stopped pretending he hadn't made his. He brought her home on a Sunday. It wasn't some grand gesture. No banners, no fanfare. Just Scout in the back of his old truck, curled on a worn blanket that smelled like clinic antiseptic and pine needles. The house was modest, a single-story rancher tucked behind a low chain-link fence with a crooked mailbox and a porch light that flickered when the wind blew. Scout stepped out cautiously, nose twitching. She sniffed the welcome mat, the screen door, the patch of dry grass along the edge of the sidewalk. Then she trotted to the front steps and sat down, waiting. Like she'd done it 100 times before. Inside, she circled twice before settling on the rug beside the couch. Caleb dropped her fox toy in front of her, and she placed a paw over it like she was drawing a boundary line. This was hers. By Tuesday, Scout had memorized the layout of the house. She had staked out her favorite sunspot in the hallway, figured out how to open the laundry room door with her nose, and decided the sound of the refrigerator opening was a cue for attention. She had claimed her world piece by piece. But on Thursday morning, the call came. "Caleb, it's Lisa. We need you back at the shelter. Something's off." He was already pulling on his boots. "What's going on?" "It's about the fire investigation and the cameras." The shelter had recently installed 2 new security cameras after the wildfire scare. Nothing fancy, just standard motion sensors covering the front lot and rear storage. They weren't monitored live, just recorded in case of emergency. But that morning, Lisa had reviewed a clip from 4 nights ago when Riley's temporary suspension became permanent. There was movement near the back fence, a figure slipping behind the trash bins, a car parked without headlights in the alley. Then a shadow near the intake wing, someone trying to open the side kennel gate. They failed. Scout barked once, and the figure bolted. "She stopped it before it even started," Lisa said. "She didn't bark at the wind, she barked at him." Riley had been caught on camera. Still no charges, but enough to file a restraining order, enough to raise flags about why he'd come back at all. Caleb sat down hard on the bench outside the intake wing, the video still playing in his hand. Scout had sensed it, known it, protected them all again, the same way she had with Bodhi, the same way she always did, without fear, without hesitation. That night, Scout slept beside his bed, her body curled in a crescent, her paw resting against his leg. Not for reassurance, for connection. She never forgets, Lisa had said, but she forgives in her own way. The next morning, Scout woke early. Caleb found her standing by the door before sunrise, tail lifted, eyes clear. "You want to go in today?" he asked. She trotted to the truck. At the shelter, she walked the kennels without cue. One by one, she passed the new dogs, some growling, some trembling, some silent. She stopped only once, beside a crate with a hound mix barely 6 months old, shaking so hard his nails tapped against the metal tray. Scout lay down beside the crate, pressed her shoulder gently to the gate. She didn't move for 30 minutes. When the pup finally stopped trembling, Caleb stood in the hallway watching, stunned, heart full. She had become what no training could replicate. A presence, a reminder that healing was possible. Later, as the sun set behind the shelter's old oak tree, Scout walked out to the backyard on her own, found her usual patch of grass, and dropped the fox toy beside her with a soft grunt of satisfaction. She looked out across the field like she was guarding something. Maybe the shelter, maybe her past, maybe her peace. And Caleb, standing by the door, realized something profound in its simplicity. She wasn't just a dog with a second chance. She was the second chance for everyone who walked through those doors. Scout's last morning at the shelter didn't feel like a goodbye. Not really. It was a Tuesday. Quiet, sunny, the kind of Arizona morning that smelled like warm dust and juniper. Caleb had driven in early with Scout riding shotgun, her nose pressed gently to the open crack of the window, ears flicking with every desert breeze. Her fox toy was tucked beneath one paw on the passenger seat like it was going along for the ride. Inside, staff were already bustling. A school group was scheduled for a tour. Lisa was reorganizing medical supply bins. Elena was on the phone with a local news outlet doing a piece on adoption rates. And Scout? Scout walked straight to the recovery wing like she was still on duty. She checked every kennel, every corner. She stopped at the cage of the young pit mix that had refused food for 2 days straight and lay down beside her. 10 minutes later, the pup started to eat. Caleb leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching. "You never clock out, do you?" She didn't even look back, just kept being exactly what she was, constant, quiet, loyal. Around noon, Lisa pulled Caleb aside. "There's someone here to see her." He tensed, but it wasn't what he expected. Not an adopter, not a reporter. It was Sarah Landon, the director of a regional canine therapy program out of Flagstaff. She'd seen Scout's story through a rescue newsletter and had been following updates ever since. "She's remarkable," Sarah said, crouching beside Scout, who sniffed her, then gently placed her chin on Sarah's knee. "We're building a program for trauma-informed therapy work. Quiet presence dogs. No tricks, no commands, just presence." Caleb didn't answer right away. He knew what this was. It wasn't about giving Scout away. It was giving her the chance to become something even greater. Sarah continued. "No pressure. She wouldn't live in kennels. She'd stay with me. House, yard, routines. But she'd travel to VA clinics, trauma centers, crisis schools. Only if she wants to." Scout looked up at Caleb then, eyes steady. No fear, no panic, just readiness. He knelt beside her. "What do you think, girl? One more chapter?" Scout stood, walked over to Sarah, then looked back at him and wagged her tail, slow, deliberate, just once. She had made her choice again. Not out of obligation, out of purpose. That afternoon, Caleb helped pack her things. The fox toy, still slightly torn. Her blue collar. A photo of the two of them taken during the wildfire drills. When it was time, Scout climbed into the back seat of Sarah's SUV, turned once, then laid her head on her paws like she'd done it 100 times. Caleb didn't cry. Not until the SUV reached the road and Scout lifted her head one last time to meet his eyes through the window. Then he let the tears come. Not of loss, of pride. Because he hadn't just witnessed a recovery. He'd witnessed a becoming. That night, he sat on the porch of his house, the place that had once held Scout's paw prints in the hallway and her nose prints on the windows. And he smiled. She was out there now, helping someone else breathe a little deeper, sit a little stiller, heal a little more than they thought they could. Scout had started as a discarded puppy in a box marked "Don't Want Her," but she ended as a light in someone else's darkest room. There are dogs like Scout in shelters everywhere. Some don't bark, some don't wag, some shake or hide or go silent because the world taught them that being invisible meant staying safe. But when we choose to see them anyway, to wait, to listen, to show up, we don't just save them. They save us right back. Scout's journey doesn't end here. It continues with every life she touches, every quiet room she steps into, every human who finally feels seen. So if her story moved you, if it reminded you of your own dog, your own rescue, your own second chance, subscribe to the German Shepherd channel. Share her story. Be someone's reason to keep fighting. Because sometimes the smallest bark carries the loudest hope.